Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Saturday evening, Saturday the 24th of November, and it is Saturday night silver with Smaulgld. And tonight's topic is silver as an inflationary metal, the price revolution. We're going to talk about silver as a catalyst for inflation, not as a hedge for inflation. But before we do that, we have to go through the markets, and the only markets open today are the crypto markets, and they're taking another nice slamming, a real beating. Excuse me. Bitcoin down 12% at 37.50. Bitcoin Cash, or Bcash, down 16% to $171. We mentioned a week or so ago it was $620. That one has been the big loser. Participant in the contentious fork after it already forked from Bitcoin. Ethereum at 109 down 10%. Litecoin down almost 11% at 28.55. And Ethereum Classic with a 4 handle at 4.55. Well, we're still in the Thanksgiving weekend, Black Friday weekend, Cyber weekend, and so on. And I just called to your attention, I'm trying to stay away from the promotion of the mugs tonight. However, the mug you're looking at, that frosted mug, really is a big opportunity. That is the most expensive Smaulgld mug. The picture doesn't do it justice. It's normally $26. It's 60% off this weekend, and that mug can be had for $10.78. So I'll leave you a link for that, and after that, we're not going to talk about mugs, but that is, excuse me, that is a very good-looking mug. It's 16 ounces. All the other mugs at the Smaulgld store are on sale, but they're on sale at 20% off this weekend. Not the ones that come from Smaulgld headquarters, the classic and super classic mugs. Those remain at the same price that you see on the Smaulgld website, but the Smaulgld travel mug, the beer stein, this beer mug, the Smaulgld espresso mug, they're all 20% off as well, ordered directly from the manufacturer. And there's the link there at zazzle.com/Smaulgld. All right, well, let's now get into the topic of the evening, silver as an inflationary metal, and we're talking about the price revolution. Uh-oh, we got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent.
This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
All right. Silver as an inflationary metal, the price inflation. Now, normally, when we talk about inflation and we talk about silver, we talk about silver as a hedge against that inflation. We don't normally think of silver as being a catalyst for inflation. What I want to do tonight is give you some brief historical background on the price revolution and then talk about how we view silver today. Do we view it correctly? Is it money? Is it a commodity? What would happen if there was more of it? What would happen if there was more demand for it? And so on. So I'm going to give you some historical background, and that maybe you can use that as a framework for how you may look at silver. I know most people today are just brainwashed to think silver is money, period. Silver is rarer than gold. Silver is going to $100. There's not much analysis going on, and there's really not much thinking going on. There's just a lot of repetition. So I'm going to try to give you a broader historical basis other than silver has been money for 5,000 years. Silver will always be money. No. Okay. A long, long time ago, in let's say the Middle Ages, land was wealth. That was how people valued wealth. You had land. Now, land didn't produce income, didn't matter. The king controlled the land. The land was dolled out. The land was valuable because you could produce goods and you can produce food. You can use it as byways and highways. You could charge people to go through your land. You could put cattle on the land. You can grow stuff. Land was basically what you wanted. Now, silver and gold may have been used to transact for the other goods, but land was the big thing that you wanted. Now, during the plague, the European plague, that was around 1347, 1350, around that time period, the height of it, Europeans were dying left and right, maybe 30, 50, 60% of the population gone, 75, 100 million, maybe even 200 million people lost. And that had all come from Asia, Belt and Road, right? The Silk Road. The Europeans had opened up trade with the Europeans, with the Asians, and they had ships that were moving in and out of the Mediterranean into the Indian Ocean. There was a lot of trade going on. And the Black Plague came from, they suspect, from the rats on the ship that were transported. I'm not going to get into the history of the plague here, but we need to look at this tonight from the perspective of what impact that had on the economy of Europe. So now they've already established trade with Asia. It's not like they don't know it's there. It's not like they don't understand the value of that trade. But a lot of people died. And with fewer people, many of those people ended up moving in the cities. Obviously, if your town has been depopulated, you really can't live there anymore. So a lot of people moved into the cities. Now, from an economic perspective, that I got a bug in my throat. That increased. That increased the value of the labor of the remaining workers. Obviously, supply and demand. If people die, then there's fewer workers, and then the demand for labor increases. Also, the value of commodities decreased. And that makes sense, because commodities, by definition, are high volume, low margin, and they got unfinished goods. So if you're used to selling thousands of barrels, thousands of tons of a particular commodity, or hundreds of tons of a commodity, you're going to sell less of it, but you're going to pay your workers more money to produce it. So that causes a problem. The demand is not there. You can't just produce a lot of commodities, a lot of food, whatever it is, wheat, and expect there to be a market for it if there's half the population. And yet, you're paying your workers more money because there's fewer workers. Well, what a lot of merchants and owners of the means of production realized was, in order to make money, they couldn't just sell commodities. They had to somehow add value to their commodities. And if they're going to pay more for the labor, they would have to employ them in ways in which they added value to those commodities. So, for example, wood. Now, wood's a commodity, and you can make standard issue tables, chairs, and so on. But if you wanted to make any money, because you're going to sell fewer tables and chairs, you'd have to really add some value to it. So these higher paid workers, if they would learn, they would come into the cities, they may become part of the guilds and learn more skilled crafts than just putting 4 legs and a block on top of furniture and making into and adding more value to the commodity, the wood. Same thing with the gold and silver. Instead of making basic jewelry, they may spend the time to craft finer jewelry. Now, with the workers getting paid more money, they can also afford these higher priced goods. Even with grain, you can see, just selling grain, you might start making whiskeys, more evolved whiskeys, longer aged whiskeys, things that require a greater labor input into the commodity to make the commodity worth more money. Maybe even increase, instead of just making basic bread, making specialty pastries, where again, you get more value out of, use the same dollar amount of grain, but instead of selling it in the form of a loaf of bread for $1, you sell it in the form of a smaller pastry for $3. Just making up numbers. And then the higher paid workers can afford to buy those products. So that's somewhat, I think, the economy of a decimated population, where the workers come into the cities, they join craft guilds, they get paid more, but there's less demand for their products. Well, over time, in 100 years, the population builds back up. You have more people in cities, and now you have a greater need for more food, and pretty much the plague has faded, and by the mid-1450s, 1460s, the population is near back to where it was 100 years later. But the world has evolved in a different way. They still want to trade with Asia. And then the Europeans, the Spanish, the Portuguese, they discover, to use the term, the New World. And with that, in their continued trade with the East, they're trying to get to the East by going west, which didn't work out. But what they found there were massive amounts of gold and silver. Thousands of tons of silver found their way back to the Spanish crown, Portuguese crown, and at the time, since silver was used as a medium of exchange, that was in effect the equivalent of an increase in the money supply. Now, an increase in the money supply, as you all know, is the standard definition of inflation. And an increase in the money supply coupled with an increase in population and fewer goods is the definition of price inflation, because you have more people with more money or more cash, or however whatever your money is in your society at the time, chasing fewer goods, and the prices go higher. Well, that's exactly what happened in Spain and across Europe, because that silver made its way back. Not only did you have all that silver, which was used as a medium of exchange, coming back to Europe, you also had domestic silver mines in Poland. Throughout Europe, there were a lot of silver mines in Europe in the Middle Ages, during the Renaissance. They were also adding silver into the money supply. So now you've got silver, very plentiful, and because you've had this big increase in the population, you now have fewer goods being produced, and you've got inflation. Now, that does help those in debt pay off their debt because it creates inflation. We're going to see tomorrow the story of the silver Democrats, where they were always in favor of silver because it helped increase inflation and reduce the burden of those in debt. So what you're seeing is silver, because of a sudden increase in the production of silver and the transportation of that silver into a economy, creating, in a sense, price inflation. Now, that's because at the time, silver was considered a medium of exchange. It was a commodity, but it was really a medium of exchange, and it drove the prices higher. Now, there's another time where the reverse happened in the gold rush in 1849. A lot of gold was found in 1849, and that gold found its way back east from San Francisco, and that created an inflation and also made silver more valuable because there was more gold at the time, for a short period of time, plentiful in the economy. Now, the question is today, what would happen if we had an increase in silver supply? So, for example, let's say a meteor, they do meteor mining, and it's profitable. Not the way they would, today it would make no sense to do meteor mining. Or more likely, there's been a new discovery in Mongolia, and they say that there's like over 1 billion ounces available there to be mined. What would happen to the price of silver if there was an increase in the amount of silver? Now, today it's different. Back then, silver was the money. Today, if silver were to enter into the marketplace, it would enter as a commodity, not as money. And what happens when there's an increase in commodities? Well, relative to demand, that means the commodity price goes down. And when commodity prices go down, what we saw, for example, during the plague is maybe you get an increase in silver finished goods. So for example, I would, and I'm sure others would, let's say silver to go to $2 or $3 an ounce. I would want to have a silverware set. I think that the way to add value to silver would be, and they could get more money for it than just $2 an ounce, if they crafted it into silver. So you really don't know, but the real point I want to make here is, what is silver today? Would silver cause inflation if they found 1 billion or 2 billion ounces? No, it wouldn't cause inflation. What causes inflation today is an increase in the money supply. Now, back then, bringing silver in from the New World to Spain was a direct increase in the money supply. Today, the direct increase in some money supply comes from where? Central banks, because they control the money supply. The money supply is not gold and silver. So I'm bringing this up because people keep saying silver is money, period. Gold is money, period. No, it's not. Silver and gold are impacted now by the money supply. They themselves don't impact the money supply. In fact, if they found more silver, it would not create inflation. It would actually create a deflation in the price of silver, proving, I would hope, that silver is not money, that silver is a commodity. Let me know what you think, but let's take a look in the comment sections. All right. Let's see. Joel Thornton. All right, I made it just in time. Had to take a shower in order to rinse off all that blood from the crypto market. Yes, indeed. Tom Manley, someone say silver? Yes, we did. Tonight it's Saturday Night Silver with Smaulgld, Tom, and we're talking about using an historical example of how when silver was money and there was an increase in the amount of silver into the economy, i.e. an increase in the money supply, it actually caused price inflation. And then I was asking what would happen today if there was an increase in the silver supply, i.e. 1 billion ounces, 2 billion ounces were suddenly found and brought onto the market. Would that create price inflation? I don't think so. I think it would create a decrease in the price of silver, which I think would cause people to then use silver and to add labor value to that silver in order to make silver more valuable, because at $2 an ounce as a commodity, it wouldn't be worth much, but yet you can probably raise the value of silver by crafting it into statues, silverware, jewelry, and so on. Roger Henley says, Heddy, but Cliff High and his magic web pot say Bitcoin will be 100,000 by year end. Unbelievable. The number of people are predicting all that stuff. Crypto Shrugged offer. Good evening. Hello. Andrew, to be fair, it's not the end of the year yet. Yeah, and you know, this guy from Fundstrat, Tom Lee, says Bitcoin 15,000. Now, I think, not to get off topic here, but as I've been saying, with all this Wall Street where they want to set up these trading platforms, and I know I say they want to have their own bubble, well, they need to drive the price down and make it more attractive. But between now and the end of the year, there's probably going to be a lot of announcements about what's going to happen in 2019, when is Bakkt going to open up, when is that trading platform going to go live. And it's a pretty attractive story to institutional investors to say, hey, you thought you missed the Bitcoin bubble, you didn't get to buy it, $2,000, $3,000, whatever it is, 1 to 20,000. There's another shot at it, and you could do it all through these registered exchanges with this registered and regulated storage that we've got set up for you, all to come online sometime in early or mid 2019. That's what I think is happening. They're driving the price down, they're going to get it set up, and then they're going to start their own bubble. And they're going to get people into it, and they're going to sell it to them. They're getting them in back at the ground floor. And they could probably drive it even higher than 20,000 if they want. If not, the whole thing's bust, and it all goes to zero, game over. All right. Joel Thornton. Crypto certainly aren't going anywhere. I have plenty of dry power for the capitulation move. We have time to go. And Roger says, yes, I think Bitcoin will find 1,000 again. And I think at that price, as long as there's still infrastructure and the mining is still working, which is a big if, then I just think people, so many institutional investors, if they could, would take a flyer and buy a few Bitcoin. They're $1,000. All right. So the big talk is about Bitcoin. And Pablo says, I'm waiting for my game changer mug as well. But yes, well, yours was sent to Canada. So the number that you got to check the tracking number. It's not really a tracking number. They say it's a customs number. So it may get held up in customs. Who knows? But it was indeed sent. Okay. Andrew's waiting on a mug. Andrew, when did you order yours? Silver can only use his money if the government allows it, says Tom. So 2 people waiting on mugs. Andrew says game changer. Hey, can you make a mug that has your name and stuff on it, also says game changer? Yes, I'm going to offer that soon, where you can put your name and then you can put game changer on the back. Is it true that they use 1 billion ounces a year, says Philip Quinn, and they mine 800 million ounces a year? Well, that's kind of what the Silver Institute has been saying the past few years. I actually think there's a disconnection. There's a disconnect there somewhere, because not all of the silver that's used or all the gold that's used in a given year or made into coins or whatever they use it for comes from that year's silver mine production. That's a point a lot of people, I think, miss, is that if silver mining production were to go down, especially in gold in a particular year, it wouldn't really have much of an impact, because there's a lot of secondary supply out there, recycled gold and so on. But so I don't really know if those numbers that you see about the deficits make any sense. They've been saying deficit for 10, 15 years. You would think at some point that wouldn't make any sense. You'd say, oh, how can you have 150 million ounces a year in deficit? What does that even mean? I think they just don't know how to count it. I think there's a lot of silver out there that they just don't count in the mining production because it's secondary supply, and the producers don't properly account for it, don't even need to count for it, because it's not a large amount of money when they've got revenues of $3-4 billion a quarter. Then they may miss 50-80 million ounces of silver, not put it in a line item on their balance sheet. And Pablo Pena says yes, when his mug gets to Canada, customs may think it's gold. Now all the mugs get shipped out with a $50, at least from Smaulgld. The classic and super classic mugs get shipped out with $50 worth of insurance. Those are the priority shipping. When they get sent from the manufacturer, from Zazzle, I don't think they're insured, but we did have a case of somebody whose mug broke, and they refunded his money, and then he turned around and just ordered one directly from Smaulgld. But had no problems with shipping from the manufacturer. And again, that mug you're looking at right there, that one is a beauty. It's a $10.70, something like that. It's unbelievable value, and it is frosted. That's why it doesn't look very good there. But check that one out. All right, so anyway, if you've got no more thoughts on silver as a commodity versus money, remember, silver once caused inflation because there was an increase in supply. I don't think that would happen today. If there was an increase in supply of silver today, it wouldn't cause inflation. It's not part of the monetary system. It would cause probably a decrease in the price of silver. Now, the reverse is true. As we saw in the plague era, in India and China, you have increasing population with an increased amount of money chasing a relatively stable supply of a commodity, silver. And my point about silver all along is the big demand for silver is not for stackers and for money, but rather for people who can afford it and want that commodity. And not only want it, not just in a pure form like a bar, but they want it in beautiful forms. They want it in China in commemorative coins. They want it in statues in India. They may want silverware, big seller in India. So silver has taken on an entirely, I know silver is money, period. No, it's not. Used to be. Silver's value today, big demand is either industrial for silver, and in India, there's a big demand for silverware and jewelry, and the same with gold. Gold's biggest demand is jewelry. There's a slight monetary demand at central banks, but the big demand for both of them is in the commodities. And again, if they were to find more gold or silver, would not it would not increase inflation. Remember, today, inflation is created by central banks increasing the money supply. Okay, let's see if we got anything else. Nope, yoga pants. That's that's where the silver goes. All right. Well, tomorrow night, I want to talk about the silver Democrats. And a horse is transportation. That is all you need to know. Same thing. Horses have been transportation for 5,000 years. Horses will always be transportation. Nope. Things change. Doesn't make horses less valuable. Doesn't make silver less valuable. If a horse is not transportation and gold and silver are not money, doesn't make them less valuable. All right, Persanti girl, you are late to class indeed. We gave a history lesson on silver as an inflationary metal. Back when silver was indeed money and there were big silver finds in the New World. You might want to go back and check it out. I did have a slight coughing fit. I apologize for that earlier on in the program, but please check it out. DW, in 1800, China had a silver trade. England took a lot. So do you think China will eventually return to a silver demand? Well, as we saw the other day, we did Chinese silver stackers versus American silver stackers. Chinese don't have the the coughing fit. I should have had a laughing fit too. Chinese don't revere silver. Indians kind of do for jewelry, but we saw the amount of silver that the Chinese collect is less than actually what Americans do. So I'm not sure silver is very important to the Chinese the way gold is. I think you'll see internationally. Actually, you'll see it everywhere. It's really only in the United States, I'd say since 2008, when you had a lot of these silver channels, that Americans got really interested in silver. I give a lot of credit to the big silver channels for promoting silver, because silver never was the big deal, the thing that everyone wanted. It was always gold. And Indians have taken a shine to it because it's cheap. And because if you're middle class in India, you got a lot of money, not a lot of money, you got extra money, you can buy a few silver chains. You know, you can buy some silverware and so on. Game over. All right, guys. Well, we will see you tomorrow night. We'll talk about the silver Democrats. Have a good night.